Harden with 27 points in the win.
I'm looking for Matt Devlin. It's Mike Richards calling from rawmikeRichards.com.
Hey, Mike, how you doing, buddy?
You know what? Look. First of all, it's so great to hear your voice. Of the people that I've missed from the previous job, you are certainly at the top of that list. Always loved our conversations. I thought of all the things probably, Maddie, that we would talk about. Little did I think that we'd be leading off this morning with the passing of Gord Downie. And, you've worked long enough in Canada. You've played seen the venues. You've talked to so many people across this country. I think even though you weren't born here, I think maybe you have the most different perspective of the people we'll talk to today in knowing just what the Tragically Hip meant to Canada.
Well, no doubt. I mean, I go back to Mike last summer, when the Hip were touring and being with, my friends here and listening to their stories and talking to them about what each one of those songs meant to them at a certain stage of life. And then through, some mutual friends, getting an opportunity to get to know Johnny Fay, the drummer, has certainly been, meaningful. And I understand the deep connection that this country has with the band and with Gord. And it is, unfortunate news. There's no question about that. And, I've become a fan of theirs. We Kings, kind of stands out to me, as, a song that resonates, and you can understand, why it does. But, you understand the loss, that's for sure.
And, it's just so strange after, just a week ago when I'm trying to make sort of maybe a comparison to the loss of a musician from a certain country and what does it mean to the country. Tom Petty just passing away last week, too. I would think for the United States, that was a big loss for the country as a whole as well.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because when Tom Petty, passed away, certainly in the U.S., everybody felt that influence and what those songs meant at that time of their life. And I had seen Petty, on a handful of occasions, growing up. And, last time I think I saw him play, I was, in Memphis, Tennessee, actually. So, it was some years ago. But a friend of mine who, we talk once a year or whatever. We went to a Petty concert when we were 18, 19 years old. And, sure enough, that happens. He, sends out a text to me and says, hey, remember that night? And, it's all those different, I think the significance, their music always lives on. But it brings people back to, those experiences that they have in life. And that obviously ultimately creates the connection with the performer. And, with Tom Petty, that was there. And certainly, with Gord Downie in the Hip, it was there. There's no question.
We're in conversation with Matt Devlin here on rawmikeRichards.com, those watching from the website or on the dedicated channel today on YouTube. And Matt, we are getting ready for an NBA season that, quite frankly, last night, a lot of people obviously looking forward to, what will it look like between Boston and Cleveland as they seem to have, usurped most of the headlines in the offseason. And then Gordon Hayward, and you saw what happened last night. And look, you're never really prepared for anything like that. And I know from the years of talking with Joe Theismann and just what those kinds of injuries mean, there is a psychological weight that goes on to how horrific those things can be, and Joe still carries that to this day. So for Gordon Hayward, who is a big piece of what that puzzle was to be in Boston, that was just a heartbreaking shame last night, Matt.
Well, it was a horrific sight. I think, for me, I go back, I was there the night that Sean Livingston years ago blew out his knee. Yes, that did dampen the next 5 years of his career, in some cases even longer, and then ultimately catching on with Golden State, where he's made an unbelievable impact. And it's amazing that he was able to come back from that just horrific injury. You think of Joe Theismann, Kevin Ware years ago with the University of Louisville during their playoff run. I think it was 2013 when they won the national title in the NCAA tournament run, pardon me. And then Paul George, and then last night. And the impact that it has for those that were in attendance, for those that were on the court. We saw the reaction to that. And then obviously in today's day and age where you can, see it, on social media. And, I had a couple of friends last night text me, with that frozen image of it. And you're just like, oh man, I don't want to, look at that a long time. You're kind of like just, taking a glance at it. It's unfortunate because the Celtics knew that he was going to be a big part of what they wanted to try to accomplish this year. And as we know in the NBA, because of the way the salaries are structured, that when you lose a player as impactful as a Gordon Hayward, that it will affect your team. Now, how much will it affect the Boston Celtics? We'll wait to find out, but certainly a key component there is not going to be able to play for them. And the MRI, and there's going to be a few different things that come out today, Mike, or over the next 48 hours that we'll get a little bit more of an insight as to how long it'll be.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Matt. Great talking to you this morning. A little closer to home, the Toronto Raptors open up their season tomorrow night against the Chicago Bulls. When you're looking at this Raptors roster, Matty, what's the number one question you want answered as far as what this team will bring to the court this season, and what you might be thinking about going? Okay, I'm unsure of ...
Well, I think that, when you look at a team, there's never just one question. I think there's an evolution of a couple of different components with this team. Number one being that this is a team that is going to attempt to change their offensive flow and how they attack things from an offensive standpoint with shooting more threes. Where will they get those outside of Lowry? We know can produce them. We know that Serge Ibaka can produce them. We know that C.J. Miles can produce the three. The question then becomes, is Norman Powell somebody that not only can get to the rim but can shoot the three? For a month in his rookie year, he shot 46%. I think it was March into April from three-point range. Can he reclaim that sort of shooting form? You don't need him to shoot 46%, but can he shoot in that 37% range? Also, you have Corey Joseph moving out to bring in a C.J. Miles. DeLon Wright is a player that's going to take over more of a role on this team. Can he produce from the outside as well? So to me, the first question is, that three-point shooting, is it going to be there? Are they going to stick with it even on nights in which they're not falling? Those shots aren't falling. Over 50% of their shot attempts in the preseason were three-point attempts. And there's a lot of reasons for why they're heading in this direction. And, of course, you look around the league, and the evolution of the league is that there's more, weight put on that three-point shot. But do remember that this was an offense a year ago was 22. They got off to a great start. They're ranked first in the league in offensive rating. They were 22-8. And then they kind of implemented more of a defensive approach, and then that offense kind of peeled back. And also there were some players, Damari Carroll and Patrick Patterson last year, that weren't consistent with the three. And that's when, you saw this team kind of dip a little bit. So that three to me will be key.
Well, and Matt, because of that, I mean, really, the Raptors are just a reflection of how the modern game is played now. And I think there was a time where if you had, some big 7-footer down low that, you sort of ran around that, maybe some low post stuff. But if you're Jonas Valanciunas, I mean, there's a lot of pressure probably to, I would say, drop weight, get into better shape. The agility and the footwork that they have to have going inside out. I mean, it's just you're a big guy now and it goes back to NCAA basketball as well. It's not played. The game isn't the same anymore. And I think if you're a big guy, I think there's even more pressure to have a touch. Then there was a day where it didn't really matter if the big guy didn't have a touch. Now, coming out of college, you better have that touch, and it's got to be.
Well,
from three.
it's interesting.
Yep.
Well, it's interesting look at how the game has changed, right? Where bigs would come into this league from Europe, and a lot of them would be face up, would shoot, and the league would be like, no, you have to get down low, right? You have to play in the post. Maybe a wrong player in Andrea Bargnani, but Brian Colangelo was thinking, hey, a 7-footer standing outside, creating space, shooting the three, that's really intriguing. Now, Andrea didn't develop, and we don't want to go down that road, but didn't develop the way that they wanted, and things didn't work out. But, Colangelo kind of had that mindset of where ultimately it was all heading, right? With spacing of the floor, shooting the three, bringing a big away from the bucket. Defensively, that opens up the lane more. When you play inside out now, Mike, it's not dumping it into JV and seeing what happens. Playing inside out now is, you get the high screen and roll, you get your guard or forward into the paint on dribble penetration, and then, the defense collapses, and then you're kicking it out to the three-point line, and they're going to swing it along. And it's interesting to note that Golden State had the most paint touches last year in the NBA, and on average during the course of a game. And a lot of that is Draymond Green, just below the foul line, kind of operating. They could get, Durant down low a little bit, and then they pop out high. There's a couple of different things that they do, but in order to get, the three-point shots, you do need to get into the lane. It's different, though. It's not dump it into JV. JV's role, you're going to see him, as the season moves on, more than likely attempt some threes. But really your role now as a big man is get rebounds, get second possessions for your, second opportunities for your team, be effective around the rim, then defensively, be able to protect the rim. And then also when, that situation when a Channing Frye or somebody that is a big that has to step outside, from an offensive standpoint, can you kind of handle them? And so it does simplify your role a little bit. It's not like they're going to ask you to get the ball on the block and go to work every single night. That's just not the way the game is played. Last year, 65,000 threes were attempted in the NBA, which was 6,000 more than the year before. And every year over the last 5, more threes have been made from the year prior. And there's just an article in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, pardon me, where, Mike D'Antoni, to attempt 50 threes a game. And so, here you go. It's just going to be more and more and more. It'll be interesting to see how all this kind of evolves and how teams navigate this throughout the course of the season. And to me, you're talking earlier about questions for the Raptors. I think questions for the league are, how do you defend this? Because back in the day, everybody collapses in the paint and then you race out to a shooter. But there used to be this old line of, you got to chase him off the 3-point line. And a lot of people, coaches say, chase him off the 3-point line. Well, you can't run by a guy on the 3-point line anymore because nobody's stepping in to take a long two-pointer anymore. They're just going to stay on that 3-point line, and they're going to reverse it all the way around till they get to the back end of the defense, where you're in the corner waiting for, the basketball and a wide open three happens. So to me, the next evolution will be, how do teams start to defend this?
Yeah, that should be interesting. So when we're looking at the Raptors this season, and there will be some growing pains with the philosophy change on the offense and how they're going to attack the basket and so forth. What's a realistic expectation for this team and where they'll finish in the standings, considering that there has been a couple of teams in the conference that have improved?
Top 3 team again.
So,
well, I think that they're a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. I think that's realistic. I think that, what they were last year, 3rd, year prior second. I still believe, even with teams around them improving, that this is a top 3 team in the East.
Well, it's going to be very, very interesting, and I think in particular, I'm kind of excited to see what Norman Powell is going to do. Because he's got an interesting story and kind of a great lesson for those kids out there who really think that unless you're a top 10 draft pick, you can't make it in the show. Well, if you work real hard and you believe in yourself, I think Norman Powell is that guy.
Well, certainly, it's been a interesting and inspiring journey for Norman. And when you talk to him about, coming out of high school, and many people felt that he would be a one and done player at UCLA, certainly 2 years and then out, but that didn't happen. He ended up, spending 4 years there, which was great because he ended up getting his degree at UCLA. And then, thinking, hey, still an opportunity to be a first-round pick, ends up getting chosen in the second round. But through his hard work and dedication, and then the right opportunity, and then taking advantage of the opportunity, here he is signing an extension with, the Toronto Raptors. And with DeMarre Carroll gone, certainly more of a, bigger role on this team, heading into his 3rd season in the NBA.
Hey, Matty, thanks so much for joining us here this morning. A real pleasure. I was going to talk about college football, but considering what my record was this past weekend, I think maybe I'm going to file charges against NCAA for criminal mischief, because I got to tell you, that was a little scary last week. And for all those Washington schools, that was not a good weekend. I got to tell you, aside from maybe Alabama,
Clemson.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think you just roll tide and forget about everybody else.
which is kind of how they like it. Hey, Matt, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We'll be sure to catch up with you again. It's a real pleasure, and it's nice talking to you here this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike. Really appreciate it, buddy.
That is Matt Devlin, voice of the Raptors, as you know, amongst all the many other things that he does. It's just a pleasure to have him here this morning on rawmikeRichards.com.
What? Did we just become best friends?
Yep.